Dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear candidates, welcome to this examination session at the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture of Ghent University. The candidate of tonight, Mr. Tim Bomberna, will defend his doctoral dissertation to obtain the academic degree of Doctor of Biomedical Engineering. The title of his doctoral dissertation is Computational Fluid Dynamics Models for Patient-Specific Planning of Liver Transarterial Radioembolization. His research was carried out in the Department of Electronics and Information Systems, more in particular, the Institute of Biomedical Engineering and Technology, so IBTech, and the research group Biophysical Models for Medical Applications, so the Biomeda Research Group. Mr. Tim Bomberna graduated as Master in Biomedical Engineering from Ghent University in June 2019. He started his PhD in September 2019 and obtained 4-year funding from the Research Foundation Flanders in 2020. That's a prestigious funding. It's quite competitive and definitely not easy to obtain. During his PhD, Tim published 5 journal articles as first author, 1 journal article as co-author in collaboration with the University of Montreal, and 1 book chapter together with his supervisor, Professor Charlotte Tebbout. Furthermore, he presented 16 conference abstracts. Patent application regarding his PhD work has also been submitted in collaboration with Ghent Tech Transfer Office, and the process for that is still ongoing. To put that in perspective, this is a quite significant publication output, 5 journal publications, that is above the average in terms of number of publications. That's something I can definitely add. Throughout his PhD, Tim won several personal scientific awards, including the first prize at the ENET competition for his master thesis in 2019, the Sergio Marchione Student Achievement Award in 2020, the Pitch Award at the OncoDot conference in 2020, and the Pitch Award at the Faculty Fierce conference in 2022. Next to his research, Tim supervised 29 master thesis students. That's a lot. If you divide that by the number of years, it's a very high average, both at the Faculty of Engineering and Medicine. He also supported education in the courses on the engineering project in first bachelor, modeling of physiological systems in second bachelor, and the cross-course project in the third bachelor. Biomechanics in the third bachelor, and computational biofluid mechanics in the Master of Biomechanical Engineering. That's again a lot of courses. He also helped organize STEM workshops for both high school students and summer schools for children below the age of 10. Additionally, Tim was president of the Youngster Committee of the National Committee of Biomedical Engineering between 2022 and 2024, organizing multiple one-day conferences together with his team. You may be wondering, but did this guy still have some free time? And apparently he did, because in his free time, Tim also published a popular science book, De Medische Revolutie, in 2023. So after reading this impressive resume, I hope you are ready for his presentation. So now, Mr. Tim Bomberna, the floor is yours for the next 45 minutes to give your presentation.
All right, so hello everyone. Nice that you could make it. Welcome to the launch of my second book. We always say that sequels are a bit worse than the original, so we'll find out today. I'm aiming for more Toy Story 2 than Avatar 2 today, so we will see if that works or not. So yeah, big title. I will not do a big formal introduction. I think you know who I am and what I am doing here. If you don't know that, I think you're in the wrong room. So maybe the ER is that way, so if you're bleeding, maybe go that way. Okay, so ground rule to get started. I will need the help of Johan. I will choose you to get started. Thank you, Johan. Over there, yes, that's Johan, everybody. Over there, you can see some papers with the game of Bordeaux. You can hand out some copies to all the rows. Just give 10 to each row or whatever. This is basically a bingo card, so whenever I say something, you just cross it. If you don't have a pen, you take your phone, you take a screenshot. You can edit the screenshot if you want. And so basically, if you get, one row vertical or horizontal or diagonal, you can win a nice physical copy of this book. All you need to do is just take a picture or screenshots and send it to me on whatever social media you like. And the first person to send it to me will win this book. So don't get bored, win boardable. The second thing for rules tonight, what I will do is at certain moments, not too much, mention my first book, The Medische Revolutie. Now I will cut out this first part and then show the whole presentation online. It would be very nice if you would be able to applaud whenever I mention my first book. So it seems online for the, on YouTube or whatever, that you're super enthusiastic to hear about my first book. So that would be very nice. Great, and for the rest, just have fun. Normally, you should be able to understand everything, and otherwise, it's my fault, not yours. Okay, so question of the day. You have a PhD defense. Where do you start? We all know that we did not fall out of coconut trees. We were born in the context of whatever existed before us. So if you make a PhD about technology and health and medicine and healthcare, where do you start? And I thought, okay, let's make it simple. Let's start with everything. So imagine, and for some this will be more difficult to imagine than others. Imagine that you're a muscular man living thousands of years ago in the age of the hunter-gatherers. And so you hunt cows and you get fruit from high trees and you give that to your children and your wives who are pregnant and the old and the sick people. And so indirectly, you take care of them. And then you grow old, and you're not able to hunt for cows anymore. So you hope, of course, that your son or daughter who has grown old will now take care of you. This is what we call the intergenerational social contract. In very simple terms, those who are able take care of those who are not able. It's also present in our society, of course, through insurance, pension, that sort of thing, social security, basically. Now, of course, there is something going on with our social security or something changing in our society that is making this more difficult. And so here, I think is the only graph in the presentation, so don't worry. But here you see some very cool trends, and basically you see the life expectancy at birth. There's some variation as to where you were born, but let's not look at that for a moment. And you see up until the 1900s, actually the life expectancy is pretty constant. It's somewhere between 30 and 40 years. And then something happens. Suddenly, from the 1900s onwards, this life expectancy shoots up. And so in about, let's say, 100 years, the life expectancy goes up from, let's say, 30, 35 years to 70 years. So that's pretty crazy, right? And so why does this happen? Well, there are many reasons. After World War I, improved sanitation, hygiene. After the influenza epidemic, more interest in vaccination programs. The invention of penicillin also takes around that time. So the invention of antibiotics. And so all these things help to improve the life expectancy. One problem, this changes your society. Because people grow older, and so you have more and more old people. And so that's the big paradox of modern medicine, is that we live longer, so we're healthier than ever, but there's also more disease in society, because we're able to survive the diseases that once killed us. And so that's pretty expensive. More people, more disease, more old people. And so the question is, if again, we want to take care of the people older than us and younger than us, how do we deal with these rising costs? And so the whole philosophy is to use technology to make healthcare more efficient, more effective, and to make sure that these costs of healthcare don't go up too much, and that we can care for everybody who has a disease. Now, this is an idea that I already discussed in my first book, The Medische Revolutie. Thank you very much. But of course, we will focus on it more in detail here. I can't describe all of healthcare and I can't describe all of technology. So I will focus here on a very specific technology, That's computer modeling and a specific part of healthcare, namely liver cancer. And so the question that we will ask today is, can a computer model help to treat a patient? So if the doctor has some questions, the doctor has to operate on the patient, he or she doesn't know what is the optimal way to treat the patient. So what if you could have a computer model that you could ask, okay, how do I treat this patient? Computer model tells you, okay, this way or this way. And you say, great, and you know that's the optimal way to treat a patient. That would be really great, right? And so here specifically, we're going to look at liver cancer and how we try to do that for liver cancer. Now, why do we need to optimize these treatments? So basically, some background, liver cancer, high incidence, high mortality, one of the most deadly cancers around. And so how it is treated? Well, at the intermediate stage of the most common form of primary liver cancer, it's usually treated with radio or chemoembolization. What happens? Well, the doctor makes a small incision in the leg, as you can see there. He or she uses a catheter, which is basically a small tube, advances the catheter all the way up to the liver, and then injects very locally in the bloodstream of the liver, in the liver arteries or the hepatic arteries, damaging microparticles. And these typically have a radioactive effect for radioembolization. And of course, the whole goal is to send as many of these radioactive microparticles to the tumor, and of course to avoid the healthy tissue around the tumor because you don't want to damage that. Now, why do we need to optimize this treatment? Why doesn't it work? During injection, or right before or right after, there's a lot of parameters, I will call it injection parameters, throughout this talk that can vary. So, for example, the speed of injection, the injection flow rate, the properties of a microsphere. Do you use small particles or big particles? The kind of the tip location, do you inject very close to the tumor or very far away from the tumor? All of these things can basically be varied by the doctor and have an impact on the tumor dose. But we don't know how big the impact is and how we can optimize the parameters to optimize the tumor dose. And so, basically, the doctor would want to know, okay, could I figure out for each patient what is the optimal catheter location, what is the optimal injection flow rate, what are the optimal microsphere properties, and other things, also, of course, to optimize the tumor dose, to send the most particles to the tumor. And so the question becomes this. The doctor wants to ask a computer model, I have all these injection parameters, can you tell me how do I implement each one of them so I can deliver a maximal tumor dose to the tumor? And so that's the same question as before, but a bit more specific. What I will do now is go a bit more into detail on this part, the computer model. For those of you who don't work with it, it probably sounds kind of vague. So the next part, I will explain the computer model. So what is the model? Basically, you could give a 45-minute talk about this. There's some very interesting literature on this. It's also quite important to define what they are, as I will also show later on. But I will make a very crude definition here with a lot of philosophical shortcuts. And I will say a model is a simplification of a complex reality. Why? Well, because reality is too complex to calculate or render or visualize or design or whatever. And so that's where the model comes in. You replace reality with the model. Now to practice that with you, I have 4 pictures. For each of the pictures, I will ask you, is this the model or not? So you can think about it. I will ask, is it the model? If you say yes, you raise your hand. So I will count down. Is this a model? 3, 2, 1. Who thinks yes? Okay, most people seem to agree that it's a model. It's very simple. Why? Of course, this is not a real human face. To paint a real human face would be quite complex And so Van Gogh approximates it with crude brush strokes. So he makes a model of the human face. Okay, easy. Next one. Is this a model? 3, 2, 1. Okay, great, you're in the hang of it. Everyone seems to agree that it's a model. Obviously not a real car, it's a car to do tests on aerodynamic resistance and other things. Okay, also a model. Here we have a animal, I actually don't know. Really said that the mouse or
Looks like a
rat. Okay, that's maybe it's a rat. So is this then a model or not? 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so more controversy. A rat is also a model because what we want to do here is design something for a human, but we can do it for the human ethically. Whether the rat is ethical or not, we can also debate about that. But so they use a rat to model the human. Okay, so it's also a model. Final one. Is this model a model? 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so this model is a model. So the whole reason models exist is because you can put every woman in a magazine and say to every woman, you look nice in this dress. Now you have to put someone there, of which you say, okay, I assume that you look a bit like her and she looks nice, so you must look nice in this dress. Okay, all these things are models, right? Do we always use models for the same reasons? No. Some models we use for learning, other things we use for aesthetics, for example, the painting. But here, of course, we'll focus on models for learning, and we'll focus specifically on making models with a computer. Okay, so we have a model, we know what it is. What is a computer model, and why do we need computer models? And actually, my apologies, I see a typo here. I didn't mean power of computer modeling, I meant foul of computer modeling. Now, who or what is Powell? Well, Powell is Glenn Powell. Glenn Powell is a Hollywood actor, and he recently starred in the movie Twisters. What happens in Twisters? Well, basically in Twisters, there's a big hurricane ravaging the countryside of Oklahoma. And it's a big tragedy, people died, etc. There's this other scientist, the woman, Daisy Edgar Jones, who says, okay, I can invent a chemical, and if you inject the chemical into the hurricane will cease to exist, which would be great. Only problem, she doesn't know which chemical would be the good chemical. So every time she takes her car, she drives into the store, her friends die, and she finds out, okay, it wasn't the right chemical. It's a bit problematic, of course, until, of course, Glenn Powell comes along, and he says, stop driving into the hurricane. Let's just make a computer model of the hurricane. Let's virtually inject the chemicals, see if it works or not. And then if it works, then we can do the test in real life. And so, of course, the movie played, I would say, allude with some scientific principles. The most unrealistic thing is that computer modelers would look like this. I worked with that for 5 years, they do not look like this. And so here's the model of the hurricane. Okay, great. We know what models are, what computer models are. Next step, how do they behave? Here we see the real world. We know the real world, we exist in it, we live in it every day, we do experiments, we do walks, we give presentations, we collect data, we complain about harm to our patients, and we try to regulate technology. In parallel, a different world exists, the world of the models. Big scary world with lots of scary words like computational time, meshing, simulations, uncertainty quantification. I will mention all these things later. Basically, these two worlds have different rules, and I will come back to these different rules later on. But the good thing, we can travel from one world to another. So for the rest of this presentation, we will travel back and forth to model world, and I will be your old gray wizard guiding you from the one world to the next. So how do we go from the real world to the model world? Well, we simplify things, as you already know, of course. And then we do some simulations in the model world, and then we want to go back because we want to apply it with real patients. And so we do that through the acts of validation and translation. And so this big vague question can be divided into 4 sub-questions. First 2 in model worlds, the other 2 in the real world. First of all, can we use the computer model to predict the tumor dose given some injection parameters? Can we do that? Second question, can we determine in the model world which clinical injection parameters have a big impact on the tumor dose? If they don't have a big impact, we don't care about them because we can't use them for optimization. If they are impactful, of course, we are very happy with them. We want to use them, optimize them. And then in the real world, can we show that these models are reliable? So the act of validation, of trying to show, okay, the things that we predict with the model, they also work in the real world. And then can we actually use these models in the clinic? This is translation. It's the final part of escaping our model worlds. And so basically the next, I guess, 30 minutes is just me going over these 4 questions. So let's start to travel into model worlds. First question, can we predict the tumor dose with our computer model? And how would you start to do that? So imagine you're a patient, and you go to the hospital, they say, I'm so sorry, you have liver cancer, okay. They roll you into a CT or MRI scanner and they take some images of your body. The image you're looking at, you have to look at it like a cross-section of the body, and the things indicated in pink are basically the hepatic arteries. So this is basically the bloodstream of the liver where the particles will be injected. And so once these scans are taken, these cross-sections, it's basically our job to segment them. It's basically like coloring, like in kindergarten, but you color organs of interest. Once you have colored them, you can make a 3D reconstruction. Here you see in red the hepatic arteries and in purple the tumor. And so that will be our domain in which we want to model. And then, of course, we want to solve some complex flow equations in this complex model. It's a bit difficult to do because this is a complex domain and these equations aren't exactly solvable. So typically what is done is that the whole domain is divided into very small elements, and then all the equations are approximated in each of the elements, and you add everything together and have a nice solution of the blood flow or the particle flow within the hepatic arteries. And then basically we have a solution, a computational fluid dynamics solution, where, for example, we can see for a given catheter, which you can see the beginning of the tube is basically the blue line. If we inject at a certain speed, at a certain location, how many particles go to the tumor and how many go to the healthy tissue. So this is what we wanted to know. And then we actually can make a number out of this. You can say, okay, 47% of the injected material went to the tumor. Now, if you're interested to learn more about this process, I describe this more in detail in my first book, Degroote. Thank you. Okay, second question. We can predict the tumor dose. Can we also determine which clinical parameters have a big impact on the tumor dose? And of course, the hard part is done. So what we do now, we know how our simulation works for one specific set of injection parameters. So now we just change something and we see that the tumor dose change as well. And so here I looked at injection velocity, injection flow rate, whatever you want to call it. I did different injection velocities and I looked at the tumor dose and whether it had a big difference or not. And I saw if you vary the injection speed across a specific range, you see a change in the tumor dose of 4%. So, for example, changing from 31 to 35%. It's not the biggest change. Second example. What is the impact of injection position? Now you have to imagine, this is the most difficult exercise, I think. If you look at the hepatic artery, for example, the tube in the beginning, and you cut through it, you have a circle, more or less. The catheter point, so the end of the catheter, can be anywhere inside the circle. So top, bottom, left, right, whatever. And so my question was, okay, if we vary the location of this catheter within the circle, so not along the axis, but within the cross-section, does this have a big impact on the tumor dose? And so I take a cross-section, I take different positions, I generate a tumor dose distribution. And here you can see the tumor dose, if you would vary this position, would vary between, let's say, 32% and 47%. So in total, that's a variation of 16%. And so that's much bigger than what we had before. So if we plot this on an axis, very simple axis, we see, okay, if you look at impact, injection position has a much bigger impact than injection flow rates. Okay. Now, we have some results. Can we use them in real life? We want to escape from the model world. And so can we show that these models are reliable? I have to say that I lied to you a bit before. I said, okay, computer model is very simple. You just input the injection parameters and you get the tumor dose as outputs. That's actually not true. There's actually a second block of input. These are the modeling parameters. And so when you ask, are the models reliable or not, the modeling parameters are important. Because what is important about the modeling parameters is that sometimes we don't know what they are. So these are things you have to impose in the model, but you don't know their exact values. I will give a concrete example in a moment. And so the whole question of reliability is, okay, given that we impose things on the model of which we are not really certain, do our conclusions still stand? Is it still the case that injection position has a much bigger impact than injection flow rate or velocity, or not? And so the question mark around the modeling parameters, it is quite important that we talk about reliability. And so an example of a modeling parameter is this nice curve. Basically, here we only model the liver. Move this around here, I guess. So we put out the liver and only model that. Of course, in the body, it's much more complicated because the heart pumps blood to the liver, and then blood leaves the liver and goes back to the body, and the whole circulation. And so, okay, if we only model the liver, we are cutting away all this context from, let's say, the heart. And so our model doesn't know if it's just the liver, how much blood is coming actually from the heart. So we have to impose it mathematically. You have to say, okay, this much blood is flowing to the heart. And what you see here is the velocity profile of that blood flowing into the liver from the heart. And so you see the velocity goes up. This is when the heart contracts. And then the velocity goes down as the heart relaxes. And so this repeats for every heartbeat, basically. And so why do I explain this? Well, the big problem is we don't exactly know what this curve looks like. We have to impose it on the model, but we are not certain about it. Okay, so imagine that in reality we don't have the red curve, but we might have a green curve or the purple curve. And that might result, it's different inputs, which will result in different outputs, so in different tumor dose. And so the whole question is, also for the modeling parameters, do they have a big impact or not? Is it like this? You change the modeling parameters a bit, but the output doesn't change, which would be ideal. Or is it more like this, when they change, and they change quite a lot at the output side? And so also we have to figure that out. So next to the impact of injection parameters, we also get the impact of modeling parameters. And so one thing you could do to figure out the impact is take one of these waveforms, introduce some variations, put them all through the computer model, and see if tumor dose fluctuates a lot or not. Again, quite simple. What is the problem? Well, if you have a lot of modeling parameters, you have to run the computer model quite a lot. And computer models can be quite expensive to run. And expensive, I mean long. So if a model takes 8 hours and you have 100 and certain parameters, also variations, okay, the computational time will explode very quickly. So can we do this more efficiently? Can we make this a bit more efficient? And so previously I said, a model is a simplification of reality. That reality can be anything, can be a human face, can be a human body, whatever, basically a car, or a model. Because you can also make a model of a model. You can simplify the model and put it into a new model, and then we call that a meta model. So the meta model is the model of the model. And the advantage of the meta model is that it's much simpler to run. And so we use the original computer model to build the meta model. Then we say, thank you, computer model, you've done your job, so please go away because it takes too long to run. And then we just use the meta model to run it all much, much faster. And so when I did that, I saw that the modeling parameter of the inflow curve has an impact of about 10%. So again, by varying the parameter, you vary the output by about 8%. And that's important to know again, because the big impact modeling parameters, if we don't know them, we basically, introduce some uncertainty on the outputs. We are not sure about the tumor dose anymore, but we have to say it's a tumor dose range. It varies between this value, and the difference is 10%. And if we can't measure that curve more specifically, we can't define the outputs more specifically. So that's uncertainty. After that, after mapping, say, the uncertainty and knowing which modeling parameters are important and which are not, ideally, let's say the non-important modeling parameters, you can skip them because they're not important. The important ones, you have to take into account the uncertainty. Okay, once you've done that, you have the tumor dose range, and then you try to validate it. So you try to show, okay, the tumor dose range that I calculate with my model, it results in an actual realistic tumor dose in the real world. Now, what is the real world? Well, you can do different things. Here we have a setup in a lab, basically a 3D print of the hepatic arteries, so the red domain from before, and we try to mimic the blood flow. We do it with water. We inject particles, and we measure how much particles go to the hypothetical tumor. And so this is very complex to do. It's something that we worked on for basically all 5 years and before that. Also, a lot of students worked on this. It's quite complex to set up such a system and then also to compare it to your model, because this is also imperfect and your model is imperfect, so very difficult to compare to imperfect things. What you can also do, and it's not easier, but maybe a bit more relevant, is compare the data from the hospital. So the patient goes to the hospital, gets the treatment. From the treatment, you can measure the tumor dose, and so you can compare this data with your own data. And so, for example, here we see a map of radioactivity on the right. You can see, so let's say close to the corner, this is the hospital data, and then the one closer to the middle is a simulation. Now, very difficult to compare. It's not an exact comparison, that's why I didn't show axes or numbers here. But it's a very difficult process to do, and we are still in the process of doing this. These results specifically are from Marta, I think, doing this last year. Also, Eileen before that did that in her master thesis. It's very, very complex because we add the level of radioactivity and not simple. But just to give you a general idea of how this validation process could happen in these two pathways. Okay, question of reliability, and then the question becomes, okay, suppose that we complete the exercise of validation and we show, okay, we measure a tumor dose of 40% in the patient, and the model is a range of 38 to 42%. Okay, that's pretty nice. Can we now use these results in the clinic? Can we translate these results? Let's start again here. So here we have an impact on tumor dose. These are the injection parameters. We've validated this, so for this exercise, we validated this, so you're quite certain about these outcomes. Now the question is, okay, but how do we use these results to really optimize the treatments? Okay. There's a bit of a problem. I told you about the injection position. I told you about the cross-section and the point of the catheter inside of the cross-section. But this is very difficult to do because assuming that you can use the model to define the optimal injection position, it also means that you physically, the doctor would have to insert the catheter all the way, perfectly stabilize it at one point in the cross-section inside the human body. Now the blood flow is pulsatile, the walls of the arteries are contracting and dilating, so it's a very dynamic environment, and you are assuming, okay, to make this all optimal, I can really precisely put the point, the tip of the catheter, at one specific point. Very difficult to do. It's actually something that was tested by some students of ours, and you can see their name on the bottom. So Hedwig, Laura, Marte again, and Matthias. And so they made a little device, as you can see there, also a 3D print. And they put it in the 3D print of the hepatic arteries, and they try to see, okay, can we use this to stabilize the point of the catheter? Basically, long story short, very difficult to do. also just in the setup, and if it's very difficult to do here, it's even more difficult to do in the human body. Okay, so we have a parameter, we know it has a big impact, but we can't control it in the body. That's a bit of a problem. And so I added second axis, and I call it controllability. And so here we see a big difference. Injection flow rate is quite easy to control. Usually there's just an injection pump being used or something. During injection, you can maybe set the speed at a certain value, so the controllability is quite high. But then again, as I told you, for injection position, controllability is quite low. And so this is a problem again, because again, we showed it's an important parameter. It has a big impact, but we can't control it. And so again, this induces uncertainty. So we know if we can't control the point of the catheter, the tumor node will fluctuate between 32% and 47%, depending on where exactly does the catheter tip end up. So that's a problem. Okay. So I think by now you figured out what is the ideal zone for optimization. We want a parameter that has a high impact, but also it's highly controllable, because then you can just use again the model to say, okay, this is the optimal value of the parameter. We say, okay, now to the doctor, can you control in the body? Yes, I can, perfect. And so ideally we are in the blue zone. So can we just increase the controllability of this parameter? But that was the work of the students. They showed it's quite difficult to do this, but it's not really an option. Okay. That's a problem, of course, because we built the whole model, we have all the results, we validated it, and now we can't use it because we can't control this one parameter. And so a different philosophy or a different way to work is okay if we have a parameter and we know it's important, but we can't control it. Can we maybe decrease the impact of this parameter? And then we are in the pink zone, because then we don't have uncertainty. We can't use it for optimization, okay, but if you decrease the impact, the uncertainty also goes away. And so this is work from other students, where they invented a very effective column, which should basically fit over the end of the catheter, and instead of the flow exiting to the end of the catheter, they exit to those side holes. And the whole philosophy is just an increased mixing of the microspheres with the blood. And why would that help? Well, tumors demand a lot of blood, so automatically a lot of blood goes to the tumor, and so if these particles mix nicely with the blood, then maybe automatically already have a very nice, let's say, tumor selection. And so again, we try to decrease the impact of the impactful parameter because we want to increase mixing. Okay, different philosophy. You can also do this computationally. This was work of Jana and Charlotte during their master thesis. So again, you can calculate, what's the impact of mixing, all those things. What did we see for now? Well, that's also difficult to do. So you can decrease the impact a bit, but you can't decrease it all the way. So again, you end up a bit in the land of nowhere. So again, these two strategies, they don't really work for now. So what do we do? Well, this is where I suggested, let's quantify this uncertainty. Again, the impact of the parameter is not zero, so it has an impact. You have to quantify the uncertainty and then just try to minimize it. If you can minimize the range from 50% to 5%, that's already good because you're already more sure about the tumor dose range. And so this is let's say, a novel strategy where you don't try to end up in either of the perfect worlds, but you go for, let's say, third ID, where you say, okay, let's quantify the uncertainty, let's try to minimize it, let's use this cycle category to try to minimize it. It's probably better than this we won't be able to do for now. Okay. And so to me, this is cool, maybe not to you, but to me, this is cool because we are opening up the border between the both worlds, because we have a numerical problem in model worlds, which is the uncertainty, and we have a real-world solution for this. We use the sidewall catheter from the real world, and we use it to decrease the uncertainty of, let's say, the numerical uncertainty of the prediction. Okay. And so now, basically, we've gone through all these questions, both in the model world and the real world. Now, what's next? I would like to start with this very nice quote by T.S. Eliot, who said that at the end of all our exploring, we arrive where we started, and know the place for the first time. So this is where we started. This is the field basically before I started, year of 2018. Lots of work by Jorge, you remember, and other people, of course, who are working on okay, the computer model. You know, we have some inputs. How do we build a computer model to produce some tumor dose outputs? Then I said, okay, but let's be aware that we have two different types of input. We have the injection parameters and we have the modeling parameters. And so the books with the numbers, those are the papers, just as a reference to show you a bit of overview of the whole work. And so for the injection parameters, we have uncertainty, as you remember, because we can't control some of these parameters perfectly. For example, injection position. For the modeling parameters, we have uncertainty because sometimes we can't measure them perfectly. Remember the red curve. And so what do we try to do? We use the computer model. We put this uncertainty through the model. How do I run these models? Well, again, that was the work of many other papers because I tried to simplify that first and then that didn't work. So I used a meta model, long story. And so in the end, we get a tumor dose range because of these two types of uncertainties that we can use the computer model to calculate. And so the next step would be to innovate for the clinical parameters, so invent a sizable catheter of an even more exotic design, or measure, invent some new imaging modalities to measure these red curves in the body. Basically innovate, measure, do whatever you can to minimize the uncertainty. So we can validate with this range, we can do it, of course, but the bigger this range is, the less useful the exercise. The more we can minimize this range, the more certain we are about our outcomes, and the better the validation will work. So we return to the original question. Can a computer model help us out and suggest the optimal way to execute the therapy? Well, based on the research, I would say in the model world, focus on the quantification of this uncertainty, again, arising from two sources, and the minimization of this using, real-world solutions. And in the real world, I would say focus on in vivo validation, so the hospital data. And so, to again go back to the very, very beginning, as you know now from the specific example, to answer the question of can we use technology to make healthcare more efficient, it's a very difficult, long story. I cannot give you a yes or no answer, and you will have to zoom in on every such problem like it is today and see what are the current steps, what are the next steps. And so, what will happen in 10, 20 years? Well, these models are being developed. Again, they are not perfect, as I just showed you. As they are being used more and more, what I told you before will become even more of a lie. So holes will continue to open up in this barrier between the two worlds because these things are being used more and more. A specific example, for example, if you look up a text now online, is it written by a real human or by ChatGPT? Who knows? We might go that way also for research in medicine. There might be a day where you say, okay, you have some data from patients here, but are they physical patients or virtual patients? Who knows? And so more and more, let's say, these worlds will overlap and holes will open up. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. That's something you have to prepare for and be aware of. And it is with this thought that I would like to close my part of the presentation. These are all the people I can thank who are more or less involved in the scientific process. I have many other people to thank as well, that's for later. And so thank you very much for listening. And this was the end of my first part. Thank you.
During the deliberation, the examination board has mentioned that you have done a lot of work, a lot of relevant work. For example, combining the simulations and the experiments. This is a challenge that is not given to many. You have given a very accessible presentation, an engaging presentation, and you are very mature in the discussion, which the jury definitely appreciated. Before handing you the diploma, I would like to say that the diploma of doctor is the highest academic degree that one can obtain in Flanders and Belgium. This diploma recognizes you as a scientist with authority who can independently conduct scientific research at the service of humanity and society. Society expects that this happens honestly, accurately, transparently, and impartially, in line with the principles of scientific integrity and European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, so the ALEA Code. It's an honor to bear the title of doctor, and we are confident that you will honor this title. At this moment, I can hand you over your diploma. Congratulations again.
Thank you all for being here. I think this is the point where most people say, okay, you can go to the reception because it's already been long enough, but it hasn't been long enough. Short story long, let's go. So I decided that I wanted to do a PhD when I was 5 years old, which was the final year of kindergarten. I remember it very well. We were just done picking our noses and contemplating the moral bankruptcy of late-stage capitalism. When Lies said, "Children, today I will teach you how to tie your shoelaces." And she gave us a fake shoe. And she said, at the end of the day, if you're able to tie your shoelaces, you will get your first diploma. I didn't get my first diploma that day. But I said to Lies, one day I will take revenge and I will obtain the highest obtainable diploma in academic Belgium. And so here we are today. And in one hand, I hold my diploma, and in the other, my shoes, because I still can't tie my fucking shoelaces. Now, and I have a direct quote coming, so I have to really hold my notes here. I'm not only here because of that youthful determination. I'm also here because of what my therapist calls my constant need for proving myself worthy of quantifiable achievements. And also because the people of the Research Foundation Flanders woke up one day and said, let's give 4 years of money to a white boy with rich parents. He deserved this. He was born in West Flanders and he's emotionally illiterate. He deserved it. So also thank you to the Research Foundation Flanders. And so getting the funding was about 4 years ago, and it's been 5 years of academia actually. Now, for the people who don't work in academia, it's very difficult to explain how it works. I always compare it to if anyone saw the movie Interstellar, at a certain point they fly to a planet where all of time slows down because it's super close to a black hole or something. And it's like 1 minute on the planet is like 7 months in the real world. And so I think academia is a bit like this planet where all of time slows down. Because for us, we might say, okay, I will submit a project and I get back the feedback and I get the project. And now, I try to get some people to work on it. Okay, these people exist. Okay, let's hire them and let's start. And it seems like a normal process, but here it takes 2.5 years to do such a thing. So that's academia. Now, a lot can happen in 4 years. It's been a very long process with lots of people coming in, going out. I describe it more in detail in the book, all the people I want to thank. I won't do it here because it will take too long and I will forget people. But basically, if you can get a physical copy of the book, I put some barcodes out in the reception room so you can just scan. And if you scroll down on my website, you see the acknowledgements. So you can read all about yourself there. Of course, explicitly, I should thank supervisors and the jury. I really appreciate that this wasn't really an online hassle and you all came physically, so that's very nice. Thank you so much for all the time you invested in this. Friends, family, of course, Nele, I want to thank you, but I will do that also in person. It would take us too long now. You're also in the book, but you can read there. Now, I will pivot the speech on a personal note. Despite our similar physical build and muscle mass, I do not have a lot in common with NBA superstar Michael Jordan. It might surprise you. The thing is said of Michael Jordan that he is very good at being present. It said it in the Last Dance documentary, which I definitely did not binge watch one day during COVID on a work day. Did not happen. But it said during the documentary, he's very good at being present, and his greatest gift is not the game of basketball, but is to be present and to recognize when something important happens, just to drown out the noise, to focus on what has to happen, and to rise to the challenge. I'm very bad at being present. I'm always planning and thinking and analyzing, and yeah, it's very difficult for me to be present in specific moments. Damon Albarn in the band Gorillaz once wrote, "Tomorrow comes today," and that's a bit how I think, and I hope how I stop thinking, or how I learn to stop thinking in the future, to stop thinking about tomorrow and maybe focus a bit on today. And that, tomorrow doesn't come today, but today comes today, and we focus on a series of todays instead of a series of tomorrows. That's a bit my personal ambition after, let's say, all these years. Now, of course, the story that I told you about being 5 years old, it's not true. I didn't know I wanted to do a PhD back then. When I was 18, I had to study something, and I chose engineering. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I chose that. Then when I was 23, as Charlotte described, I also had to choose whether to do something. In the end, I chose a PhD. Yeah, it was more a coincidence and opportunity than a real strategic choice. But bottom line is, for a long time, I haven't really known what I wanted to do or what I was good at. Maybe I'm a bit slow in that. But for me, the last 5 years, and I will actually include also, studying for the last 10 years at UGent, I was really able to figure out what I like and what I'm good at. That was not obvious for me when I was 18, and was not obvious for me when I was 23. And one of the things I discovered was that I really like teaching. So as you already said, I did it quite a lot just because I wanted to, and I was given the freedom to do it, for which also thank you. And so that's one of the things that I like, communicating and writing and talking. You might not guess, but I like it quite a bit. And so for the final page of my notes, and so for me, the magic thing is that I've been at this place, UGent, for 10 years, and it's really, for me, it wasn't a place that expects you to be a certain thing. I didn't know what I wanted to be, and it was a place for me that allowed me to figure out what I wanted to be. And for me, in a society where everything is a product, to be able to grow without expectations, for me, that's a rare thing. So I really like that, and I have to extend the thank you, of course, to the professors and to the students and to the colleagues, but also, to the janitors and the secretaries and whoever works at UGent and helps building a place like that, because for me, it's not obvious. And so I was happy that this place was able to allow me to be a process as I viewed myself the past 10 years. And so my final thank you, explicitly here again, more thank yous in the book. And such I will also personally thank a lot of people later. But if academia is, the little planet from Interstellar, then my colleagues are little aliens. And I think if the stars would have aligned perfectly, I would have enjoyed the rest of my life to, teach you and assist you and learn from you. Maybe most of all for, the next, the next decades. If that doesn't happen, that's okay. There's also beauty to be found in the idea that, stars don't always perfectly align. That's more than okay for me. But there's a song, I think in the song Demon by The National, that goes, and I'm secretly in love with all the people I grew up with. And as I said, that for me, if growing up was mainly the last 10 years and figuring out myself, well, then I am in love with all of my colleagues. I am forever in awe of your creativity, your spirit, your determination, your energy, your sense of humor, your intellect, your knowledge, the person that you are. I will always be your biggest fan, and I wish you well for whatever comes next. And so my message, final paragraph, to my colleagues, but also to extend it to the students and whoever is figuring things out just the same way as I have been figuring things out for the last 10 years at this place. I would say try to take your time. No one can define you and nothing can contain you. And if you ever feel stuck, that's actually a good thing, because if you feel stuck, you have to get creative, and then smart people get creative. That's usually when the world is their stage. And so I guess this is the same thing as saying what Natasha Bedingfield said in The Rest is Still Unwritten. That's the same message, more or less, but I wanted to express it differently. And so as a final note, For me, this place you get is something special. I hope that you can find a place like that, whether it's physical or metaphorical. It's all the same, of course. But I hope that for you, and I thank you, and I will see you at the reception.